At the end of the day, though, and I use this example a lot, it doesn't really matter why,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't change the fact that it hurt. I think we do get invested in why people do what they do and why people turn on us or stop coming around or, stop helping out, as if we could answer that question, it would make us hurt less. But there's not an answer to that question or an explanation that's going to make it hurt less.
Did you finally realize your dream of having a family only to have your happily ever after turn into a nightmare? Do you find yourself up late at night wondering why nothing you try as a parent is working? Are you searching for adoption resources and a support team but can't find any? Hi neighbor, welcome to Anchors of Encouragement. I'm Tim Maudlin, husband, adoptive parent, Bible class teacher, and ambassador of encouragement. I too felt the joy of having a family of my own. I wish we could be like other adoptive families. I knew we were doing our best, but nothing seemed to work. I kept asking myself, why is this happening to us? Life can be tough. Storms in life are inevitable. In Anchors of Encouragement, my mission is to throw adoptive parents a lifeline and be your anchor, to offer biblical mindset support and provide stability when life gets unstable. If you're ready for real and raw talk that leads to peace beyond comprehension, so you not only survive but thrive in life's storms, this podcast is for you. Hope and healing are on the way. Hi neighbor, I want to welcome you to another episode of Anchors of Encouragement. Today I'm excited to bring to you a conversation I recently had with a friend of the show and a personal friend of my family, Jane Baker. Jane was originally on the podcast in episodes 8 and 9. If you haven't listened to those episodes yet, I would encourage you to. Jane helped us to understand what adoption trauma is. I'll include a link to those episodes in the show notes. Jane was one of the individuals responsible for helping my son Johnny navigate the challenges of his adoption trauma while he was in residential. Adoption trauma is very difficult not only for the adopted child, but the adoptive family. Unfortunately, there can be other challenges too because of the adoption trauma. That's what Jane is going to talk with us about today. It's something she sees in her practice. It's something that I have experienced myself. The topic for today is when friends fail you. Let's get to my conversation with Jane Baker. I want to welcome back my neighbor from Alabama, Jane Baker. Jane was a member of the treatment team when my son Johnny was in residential. She was instrumental in helping him understand and navigate his own adoption trauma. She has since become a friend of the family. Jane was on this podcast early on. I would encourage you to go back and listen to episodes 8 and 9. They were actually one interview, but I broke it up into 2 episodes. I'll include the links to those particular episodes in the show notes. There's much you can learn from those episodes. There's going to be a lot you can learn from our conversation today. Jane, it's been way too long. I want to welcome you back to the show.
Thank you for having me back. I really, really appreciate it. And what a nice compliment, friend of the family. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, I sincerely mean it because when we met you, we were going through a really dark period of our family.
Yes, you were.
And you helped us come to the other side of that. And even to this day, listen to some of the things you've said on the podcast and remembering some of the things you told us at the time have helped us to navigate the challenges that we've experienced. And even though I think it's almost 5+ years removed from when he was in residential, there are still things that we remember and take to heart and use on a daily basis as we navigate this still. So again, I thank you so much for that. We were messaging back and forth prior to this episode to think of some topics to talk about today. And I want to talk about a topic, not topics. I think it's good to just kind of hone in on one thing. But you listed some things that you've been dealing with lately. And I think there's 4 different things. And one of them really struck a nerve with me because I've lived it and you deal with it with the adoptive parents that you counsel. And that topic is when friends fail you. As we get started into this conversation, can you talk a little bit about that? I've mentioned it somewhat on the show when friends have failed me, but tell me about these adoptive parents that come to you and they tell you about friends failing them. And, what is that? What's that look like? And then we can talk about how you counsel them for it.
Sure. Unfortunately, it's all too common an occurrence. Some of that has to do with the nature of and the intensity level of children that we adopt that have disorders of attachment. They have a really hard time emotionally connecting to the family, and so when you have a child with this kind of loss, and a lot of our children um, have orphanage experience or they've got foster care experience, but we can't skip over as well just sort of the nature of the traumatic separation, even in infant adoption. And we can't quantify how kids start to internalize that as they develop. But typically speaking, our children with a real trauma base have such a hard time creating relationships, and they have much harder time allowing themselves to be loved and nurtured and guided and redirected by parents. So very often these children look better outside the home. Sometimes they'll look better at school. Sometimes they'll look better at church. Everybody just falls in love with them. They've kind of got this superficial charm. And then they come home and they're very, very different at home. Constant rejection of parental authority, particularly targeting mothers over fathers, and splitting parental relationships are really quite common. So in that process, and then sometimes we have kids that are not attachment based, but they've got other problems that they just have difficulty everywhere, whether that's in school or at church, or even at home. It tends to be a little bit more intense at home. What happens over time, a lot of time, is that everybody who knows and loves you and cares about you, well-meaning, but somewhat uninformed on how come kids do what they do, but they're pretty well informed and free with advice on what you should do. And everything that if you've got biological children and you've parented before, you have one of these children, and I always think they're they're a blessing. There's a reason you got them, but everybody likes to give advice, and then over time they get frustrated or whatever with things aren't getting better, you're not getting better, things are sort of continuing to be very intense, and also along the way we as parents start to become somebody we don't recognize, and the road we're walking is very, very difficult. So very often we have people in our lives that think of simple answers to complex problems. Sometimes too, we have kids that misbehave at our friends' houses, and they start making decisions about, hey, your kid can't come over and play with my kid anymore because this is what happened and that's what happened. And then sometimes too, we have families where a child is making false allegations. And so now DHR is involved. And so now everybody's looking at you like you've done something really wrong. And so the process can really create such division and separation between the people that we've always thought of as our friends and support network. And I've certainly, with some families, even had that extend over into the church, where church leadership now gets involved and starts to look at the parents as they are the problem. And so it's been my experience as a therapist in private practice that all too often families come, by the time they get to me or someone like me, they've been through the mental health system where well-meaning but sometimes uninformed therapists point the finger at parents. Friends are starting to point the finger at parents. I've even had some parents where their parents, the grandparents, chose the child over the parents. And so there's just a lot of loss in those relationships all the way, all the way around. And it's a huge grieving process because it is a very important and loss. It's a very important hurt.
I just amen it because as I said, I've lived this. Um, the thing that was interesting about both of our adoptions, and I'm really speaking more to Johnny's right now, but people were so excited for us when we adopted him. We had gone through years of infertility, and we had gotten to the point where we just internalized this, and just a very few people were aware that we were pursuing adoption. And once the adoption was to the point where the birth mother signed the papers, I called my mom and says, now you can tell people, because we had so many disappointments. We just were hesitant to say anything. But once we let it be known, I remember one family said they just cheered because they were so happy for us. But unfortunately, as time went on and some of these challenges started to present themselves, we were getting, like you said, we were getting advice from different people. We suddenly didn't know anything about anything, especially parenting. and it was so frustrating. And I've said this on the podcast, and I want to repeat it here again. We had people pull away from us, but we had people pull closer and draw closer to us. And I tell you, to this day, those are our anchors of encouragement. And they were godsends, because had we not had those individuals in our life, I don't know what would have happened. I mean, I'm certain that we would have relied more and more on God, but having those individuals have really helped us to navigate these challenges. But over time, it was really hurtful to see people. And I'm thinking of one individual now. She told me, she said, I saw people drawing away from you, pulling back. And that's when she said, I'm getting closer. And she wanted to get messy with us. And I just love her for it.
Yeah, that's the people you can count on. And those are just people that there's just no value you can put on how important that relationship is.
Well, and that's when we met you and the treatment team in residential. To a person, you were there, and that wasn't an easy job. That was something you had to do because you love these kids. You wanted something better for them.
No, I do. Sometimes I question my sanity. But I love these kids, and I love this group of children who've just really had such a rough and bumpy start, and they're just walking around so afraid of everything and everybody, and even though they'll rather die than let you know they're afraid. So I don't know what it is, but I love this population of kids. So.
Well,
And parents, because I think it really takes special people to want to adopt in the first place. And I think one of the things you said that's so important, nobody comes to adoption because you're hesitant. Nobody comes to adoption for any other reason than you want to love a child, and you want to be a parent, or you want to, share what you have with another child, especially if you've got other children at home. Everybody gets behind you in the adoption process, or a lot of people do, and everybody's excited. And then when the reality sets in, and it's not, and a lot of adopted kids, and these are stories we don't hear about, a lot of adopted children really make that transition into family really well, and that's the piece we can't quantify or predict, is when a child's going to adapt nicely and when they're not. And I've had families where they've adopted kids from orphanages and adopted across racial lines, and they have one child who's heavily involved, with making connections with birth family or orphanage mates who've been adopted by other people close by, and this, that, and the other. And sometimes they struggle with that. And then I've had others that they adopt come in and go, would you stop talking about all this adoption stuff? And I know who my parents are, and they're right here in this room. That's my mother, and that's my father. And I don't know what your problem is, but I want you to stop talking to me about it. And so you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Pretty clear.
Yeah.
and I think we watch a lot of movies where there are good adoption stories and things like that. And so we want to kind of it's very seductive to start
Mhm.
making ourselves think that this is how it's going to work out for us too. And sometimes it does. But sometimes it doesn't. And often people aren't prepared for that.
Right. And we thought we were prepared. We had
Yeah.
a wonderful lady that walked us through our home study,
Hmm.
and she was just getting ready to retire. She had been doing it for 35 years, and we were her
Hmm.
last case.
Aw.
And she was just an angel. And we thought we knew what we needed to know, and we were ready to navigate because we knew there were going to be challenges. But
Hmm.
at that time, at least in our sphere, adoption trauma wasn't even mentioned. And
Hmm.
so that was something that just blindsided us. And we had to figure out, well, we tried to figure out for years what was going on. And we went through different processes, asked other parents, asked experts, tried to get counseling. And then it finally came to a head, and we met you and the other team in residential. And then we started to understand, oh, this is something, had we known back then
Hmm.
what we know now, we would have done things differently.
Hmm.
But we were doing the best things we knew to do at the time.
Hmm.
And it just worked out. And I've said this too on the podcast, and I want to emphasize this again. We had some difficult challenges that were presented to us, but in hindsight, looking back, we would do it all over again.
Hmm.
We would do it all over again. And I do not want to discourage adoption by any means. I want to encourage adoption, but I want to encourage adoption with the adoptive parents having their eyes wide open, understanding potential challenges and how to navigate them. That's why we're having discussions like this.
And I fully agree. I mean, adoption is a wonderful thing. We've been doing it since God made people. And there's nothing second place about adoption. It's not plan B. There's nothing unusual about adoption. It's just different. And our biological children can present us with challenges that we never thought we would have to parent. And the same thing is true in the world of adoption. But the thing that's different between our biologicals and adopted children is that nature of loss, and that somewhere I know someone referred to it in some professional literature before as ghosts in the nursery. There is that specter of the birth family, and why did they place me for adoption? Why didn't they keep me? And that's not a piece that our biological children have to navigate. So it is important entering into adoption that you are as educated as possible. But at the end of the day, it's theory till you do it.
Oh yeah.
It's just like with our biological children. I mean, I don't know how many times I've had to walk myself back because I remember saying, well, my kids will never do, or this is the kind of parent I'm going to be. I'm not going to do that, and this, that, and the other. And then you have them, and it's not theory anymore.
No,
And
it's
we just
not.
figure out the best way we can with what we know, and realize that sometimes the Lord hands us children that I've always said you might not always get the child that you want, but the Lord's going to make sure you get the child that you need,
Right.
and that needs you. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes our need is for more education.
Yeah.
I need to go learn to do something different because what I've been used to do, it's not working.
Right. I don't think I've shared, and I'm not going to take the time to go into it now, but just suffice it to say, looking back on our two adoptions, God's hand was involved in this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten them, because
Mhm.
there were things that happened that they had fallen through or were about to fall through, or we jumped the to the top of the list, just things that he had to be involved in. So we have always said, you were meant to be in this family. And, we're grateful for that. The challenges, have caused us to understand we need to rely more on God to help us process and navigate these challenges. But also we need to reach out to people like you to help us along this path, because, again, we just don't know what we don't know. And so
Right.
it's helpful to understand these things. One of the things we were talking back and forth as we were messaging about this topic is, I've posed this question, well, why do our friends fail us? Why do they they pull back? Why do they walk away? There's a number of things, and maybe if you want to speak to something like that,
Sure.
some of those ideas you can. But then I've got one question I really want to hone in on for
Okay.
this episode. So go ahead and
Okay.
take that one if you want.
Well, I think sometimes our friends back out of our lives because they just don't know how to help us. Sometimes we don't know how to help ourselves when we're in the middle of all of this stuff. And sometimes people are so uncomfortable with another person's pain or what they're going through, and they don't know how to help, and so they just don't. Sometimes what we're going through or what our children are doing or everything might remind them of some of their own past or their own struggles, their own grief that they don't want to touch. And sometimes people are so secure in the way they do life that they're unable to assimilate new information or unable to get to have an idea that what you've always thought may not work. So they default to, there's got to be something wrong with you. Well, you're just not doing it right. Well, you're not working hard enough. And so sometimes people are real secure in the way they do life, and to some extent have not ever been challenged in the same way that you are being challenged. And so they have all kinds of opinions about that and often are very free to share those things. Not only just with you, but with everybody.
Yeah.
And so, so there's that. And sometimes people have more influence than they maybe need to have. And so, sometimes people just don't know what to do, or they don't know how to help you. And they don't want to get in the middle of something. And I'm thinking more specifically about the individuals that I've had where their churches and leadership got involved because of somebody who was very secure in their position about how you parent. And there's a lot of reasons. And sometimes the only people who know for sure is that person themselves. At the end of the day, though, and I use this example a lot, it doesn't really matter why.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't change the fact that it hurt. I think we do get invested in why people do what they do and why people turn on us or stop coming around or, stop helping out, as if we could answer that question, it would make us hurt less. But there's not an answer to that question or an explanation that's going to make it hurt less.
Mm-hmm.
If I hit you with my car out here in the driveway and I break both your legs and I've just handed you a big old hurt, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I did that on purpose or by accident. If I get out of the car and I apologize and I call the ambulance and I pay your medical bills and I take you to rehab and as you're learning to walk again and all this stuff, and I do all these things, you're just going to feel better about me versus, and she just drove off. Wait, but not one bit of that is going to have anything to do with how fast you heal, because I've handed you a hurt and it now becomes yours and you have to do the healing. So sometimes we get an explanation and it makes sense and we feel better about that person. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to, heal our own woundedness, and nobody can really take, and no explanation is going to make that better.
I was thinking as you were saying that, we can't know for certain motives unless they tell us.
Right.
And it's really pointless, and it's damaging to yourself if you try to figure out, well, why are they doing this to me? And really that's not the point. I'm thinking of when Jesus was suffering, and don't get me wrong, I do not want to equate anything I've gone through with what he went through. Mm-hmm. But there's a verse in First Peter that said he did not retaliate when he was insulted. It's been tempting to say, okay, you just don't understand what we're going through. Well, they don't. Mm-hmm. But they don't. There's no point in retaliating. That's not going to help the situation. And maybe on future episodes, and what I've been trying to do prior to this is try to educate people, non-adoptive parents, as to what's going on so that they can understand. We'll leave that discussion for another time as we continue to build on this. But you're right. We have to to deal with this on our own, even when we've been hurt. And so that was a good segue to what I really want to dig in on as we wrap this episode up. And this is will be our daily doable. How have you counseled adoptive parents when they told you their friends had failed them? I mean, you don't go out and try to deal with the friends who have failed you, but how do you deal with it yourself? How have you counseled those individuals?
Just sort of in a context when people hurt us, and that is a sense of betrayal. I mean, when you think that somebody's your friend and then they turn out not to be, and they actually start working against you. That's a sense of, that's betrayal. It's not even a sense of betrayal. It is betrayal. Let me just be clear. Where we end up needing to go with that is some level of forgiveness. So part of forgiveness is, and we get a lot of mixed messages about what forgiveness is and what it's not. And Jesus tells a story of a rich man who goes away. He's going away on a long journey. And in those days, business trips took a long time, and leaves everything in the hands of his chief steward, including his family. So there's his business, his finances, his family, everything that's important to him. He leaves it in the hands of this person who's the most trusted position you could have other than being family yourself. And he comes back and he realizes, hey, you know what? This man has taken, he does an inventory because that's what all responsible people do. And he says, oh, he's taken more money from me than he can pay in a lifetime. Okay, there's the hurt. There's the inventory. And sometimes we have to do that, not necessarily in that order, but when somebody betrays us, they take something from us. When someone hurts us or they fail us, it's a loss, and they've taken something from us. Part of the beginnings for forgiveness is the telling of the story, the taking of the inventory. What got taken? How do I feel about not just what got taken, but the person? How do I feel? And going back to the story that Jesus tells, I love the King James Version because I just love that language. But it says he was wroth, which is an archaic word, but it means he was angry on a cellular level. There was not one piece of him that wasn't mad.
Uh-huh.
And he had all of his feelings. And I'm pretty sure he expressed all of his feelings. Because it's somewhere along the way, because then what we want next is we often want justice. Well, I want my stuff back. Or I want you to make it right. I want you to apologize. I want you to make me feel better about what you just did to me. We want justice, restoration. And so he, within the parameters of the law, he said, go get him. Basically, I'm going to paraphrase because he said, go get him. Go get his wife and his kids, little dog too. Get them all. Put them in debtor's prison where they will stay for the rest of their lives. Okay. Now I think I might feel better. So when we've been hurt and something has been taken from us, we have to know what that is. And so for me, when I start working with people, it's tell me the story. Tell me what happened. Because when we put words to it, we organize our thoughts, we organize our feelings, and we validate just in the telling of the story. We validate that. Now, as a therapist, I'm looking in that story for what the hurts are, and is there any possibility that this person's emotional responses are more intense than what the situation is calling for, because that would be an indicator that something about this is touching earlier losses. When we experience one betrayal, it often reminds us of others. When one hurt, one disappointment, one sense of being abandoned, emotionally abandoned, can often leap back to earlier losses, and then it all gets wadded up together. So as a therapist, that's kind of some of the pieces that I'm listening for, because we have to untangle that in order to get to that place of healing and forgiveness. So telling of the story is very important. Also, being able to express your feelings. And often when people hurt us, we want to pretend like it doesn't matter. And we want to say, well, okay, it's not a big deal. Well, other people have been hurt worse. But being able to stay in that position where you make it about you and you do validate that this hurts, that also makes it real, and real things we can work through. So going back to the idea of forgiveness and Jesus' story. So somewhere along the way, this man hears of his fate, and he comes and he's begging and pleading, and we're not told what he said. And I'm really kind of grateful that we're not, because we would get all 7 kinds of legalistic around that probably. Because the point of the story is that in the middle of all of this, somewhere in this process of this person begging, and you can imagine what he's begging for, forgiveness, second chance, I didn't mean it, lots of excuses. You can just put in that bucket whatever you need to put there. But somewhere along the way, the scripture says this man had compassion and he forgave the debt. Forgiveness means to set something aside. So while we might not be able, when I ask God to forgive me, I don't want him to set me aside. I want him to set aside what I owe because of my weaknesses and the things I've done. So here in this particular story, there is the key toward forgiveness. I'm going to tear up this idea that you owe me something, that you need to make it right, because I think that's where we get really very stuck a lot of times, and we don't allow our own healing to take place because we're waiting for this other person to come and make it right. And getting to that realization that I have been hurt, and I have been abandoned, and I have been betrayed, but I can be okay even if they don't make it up to me. I can still be compassionate toward them, which is not empathy. It's not sympathy. It's compassion in my mind is about when somebody's done something and it reminds me of my own failings, of my own weaknesses, of other times when I've maybe failed other people. And out of that, I can have compassion for that person, but it's not saying what they did was okay. It's not denying the hurt. It's just going, I understand how people fail, and I can be okay. I will be okay, even if we never are able to patch this up. If they never come back and apologize, I can be okay. I can tear up the debt. So if they do come back at some point and say, I'm so sorry, I realized what I did, I'm so sorry, that would be a gift, but not a prerequisite for healing. So in therapy, when we're dealing with this, it's so important to have people that around you, whether it's in therapy or it's your friend group, that let you tell the story. And they're doing that without judgment. They're doing that without choosing up sides and going to war on your behalf and all. They just listen, and they let you do the grief work.
Mm-hmm.
And they support you through all that. And they're the people, the voice in your ear going, well, you know what? You're going to be okay. You're okay. It's so sad that this happened. And I hate that this happened for you. But we are, and more than our losses. And these are the people who say to you, how can I help? What do you need? And most of the time we don't know, but they go, well, I'm just here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to sit with you, or I'm just going to listen to you, or I'm just going to, be there for you. That kind of allows that grief process to happen in a real genuine way, rather than what we sometimes do is try to pretend that things are okay, when it's not. And I always think about one of my children, and something would, I go, that's it. You need to go to your room. I want you to go to your room. I need a minute, and you need a minute. Go. And they'd look at me and toss that head, go, well, I wanted to go to my room anyway. Right? So sometimes we're pretty good at pretending that we're not hurt or not upset when, we really are. And just being able to work through that grief process it's not always easy to do.
Those are excellent points. And the one thing I'm thinking as you were talking about those, this doesn't happen overnight.
No.
It's going to take some time. Mm-hmm. But if you can start to, as you said, tell your story and find people who will listen. The one thing, I doubt that this is the case, but I would imagine there's someone or some people in your life you could do this with. But even if you can't think of any, you can always do this to God. And he wants you to be real and raw with him.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing is this is a form of lamenting, that
Yes.
you're just really expressing, the rawest of emotions that you're facing. But as you're doing this, there's a cathartic and a healing that's taking place. And so I really appreciate you walking us through this process, because this can begin the hope and healing. That's what this podcast is about, is providing hope and healing for adoptive parents. And so this has been great for our audience to listen to and start to apply in their lives. So I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for asking me. And I hope it'll be, helpful. It's like we're just kind of hitting the tip of the iceberg, but that's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a good indicator. We need to come back and do this more often. And it's been way too many episodes since you were on here last, and I want to rectify that and have you more on a more regular basis, and we can start to dig into specific topics and really flesh them out. And so let's plan that for the future.
Always be available for you.
I appreciate that. How can people, if they want to connect with you, and I know you have a practice of your own, how can they reach you? And I'll put this in the show notes, but just tell us briefly how they can contact you.
I am located in Priceville, Alabama, just out. Actually, we've been incorporated into Decatur.
Mm-hmm.
So my email address is the letter J Baker at adoption-associates.com. We do have a website that we're still expanding, but it's Adoption and Psychotherapy Associates is the name of our business, but the website is adoptionassociates.com, and it has that little hyphen
Mm-hmm.
in there. So, and there's a way on there you can also contact us, and that would be a way that people can get send messages to me, or allow me to maybe help out as best I can. We run into a little bit of problem as far as doing therapy across state lines, so often people are close enough that they can travel to Alabama, but sometimes we can do a little bit of consulting and different things, or maybe I can help you locate a therapist close by to you, and
Mm-hmm.
and things like that as well, because there are more and more people who are much more trauma informed than they used to be, and we're just we're really grateful for all the hands that are professional people that are have a love for these kids and families, and try to make life as better as best they can.
I will put the links, make sure I include the hyphen in the show notes, so that everybody can just click on that and take it to the website, and you can contact Jane. Again, thank you so much for being on here with us today, Jane. I appreciate your love for these kids, and for adoptive parents like myself. You have been a godsend to us. So thanks again.
Thank you for that. And I really, really appreciate you having me back. And like I said, I'll be available to you anytime you need me.
Perfect.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to have had Jane back on the show. She is such a wealth of information and encouragement. Here are some of the takeaways. Number 1, friends can pull away from adoptive parents for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because they just don't know how to help. Sometimes they are uncomfortable with your pain. And sometimes your situation reminds them of their own past struggles and grief. Number 2, regardless, if a friend hurts you and never apologizes, you can still be okay. You can forgive them as part of your healing and move on. Apologies are not a prerequisite for your healing. And number 3, telling your story is part of your healing process. Find an anchor, whether a therapist or a friend, who will let you tell your story without judgment or taking sides. They will sit with you, be there for you, and listen. That's all for this episode. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, this is Tim, encouraging you to do what you can now. If this podcast has given you the courage and confidence to face storms in your life, the number one way you can thank me is to leave a written review on Apple Podcasts. Tell a friend about the show. Take a screenshot of this episode and share it in your Instagram stories and tag me at Tim Maudlin. You can also connect with me in my Facebook group, Anchors of Encouragement. So until next time, this is Tim encouraging you to do what you can now.